Part 28. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yuchi. Chapter 271. In the emergency building of the affiliated hospital. That's right, it was this despicable, insidious, and cunning bastard who injected the poison into my second sister's body, causing me to advance to the state of a vengeful spirit in advance. When Xiao Yuyang saw the clear portrait of a person on the homework paper that Zhang Fengjai unfolded, he immediately pointed at the portrait and cursed in anger. After getting Xiao Yuyang's confirmation, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look, and he folded the homework paper and put it into his sleeves, then pointed his sword at Xiao Yuyang and asked, "Vengeful spirit, do you want to end your life by yourself, or do I send you to heaven personally? Mr. Zhang, your current cultivation is not as good as mine, what qualifications do you have to decide my fate?" When Zhang Fengjai used his sword skills to repel the surgical instrument that stabbed Zhuang Jian, Xiao Yuyang had already seen through his true strength. The cultivation of the initial 8th level of qi condensation is a small realm lower than his own. Therefore, when facing the fate decision given by Zhang Fengjai, he immediately showed a contemptuous look in his eyes and said mockingly. In response, Zhang Fengjai's counterattack was very simple, that is, the sharp sword condensed with spiritual power in his hand stabbed directly at his forehead at a speed as fast as the wind. Facing the fast-stabbing sword, Xiao Yuyang's arm suddenly stretched forward and trembled, rescuing all the surgical instruments that were knocked away in the room, and countless fragments of the tempered glass door immediately flew into the air and stabbed Zhang Fengjai. In response, Zhang Fengjai ignored the countless hidden weapons stabbed from behind, locked the position of Xiao Yuyang's forehead, and continued to increase the speed of the sword attack. Zhang Fengjai's seemingly lose-lose style of play is actually the safest means. As long as the sword successfully pierces Xiao Yuyang's forehead, the resentful spirit that has not been completely perfected will definitely die, then the surgical instruments and countless glass fragments that are not controlled by the resentful spirit will also lose their fatal threat. Xiao Yuyang, who also realized that his attack method was wrong, suddenly changed his face and instinctively wanted to distance himself from Zhang Fengjai so as to avoid the threat of the sharp sword. But he forgot that he not only had a physical body, but also a solid wall behind him. So, when he found that he could not avoid the attack of the sharp sword, Xiao Yuyang could only choose to sacrifice his pawns to save his chariot and escape for his life. His residual soul immediately left Xiao Yushi's body. Looking at the residual soul that had left Xiao Yushi's body like a shadow, Zhang Fengjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief and immediately threw out 2 different types of talismans. One was a soul-fixing talisman to prevent the residual soul from returning to Xiao Yushi's body. One was a demon-breaking talisman to destroy Xiao Yuyang's residual soul. However, the residual soul that lost the restraint of the physical body not only had the ability to fly in the air, but also could shuttle freely without any physical obstacles. So, facing the demon-breaking talisman thrown by Zhang Fengjai, the residual soul took off directly into the air without any hesitation, intending to escape directly through the roof ceiling. Bang! But just as the residual soul was trying to get through the ceiling, a green light suddenly appeared on the ceiling, not only blocking the residual soul from penetrating, but also bouncing it back directly, and by coincidence, it hit the evil-breaking talisman that Zhang Fengjai had just thrown. Ah! The moment the residual soul touched the evil-breaking talisman, it automatically burned under the influence of the residual soul's resentment and evil spirit. Immediately afterwards, the burning flame of the talisman directly enveloped the residual soul, and then began to burn the resentment and evil spirit on which the residual soul depended for its existence, which made Xiao Yuyang's residual soul howl miserably. Looking at Xiao Yuyang's residual soul, which gradually became illusory under the burning of the talisman flame, Zhang Fengjai's expression was as calm as water. In fact, at the moment when he determined the true cultivation of the resentful spirit, he had already anticipated that the other party might use the residual soul to escape from the constraints of the flesh and be able to freely shuttle through space to escape. Therefore, At the moment he rushed into the emergency room to rescue Zhuang Jian, he had already posted 2 soul-fixing talismans on the wall of the emergency room in advance to prevent the other party from escaping through the wall. As the miserable howling gradually weakened, Xiao Yuyang's residual soul was burned by the talisman flame and finally turned into a puff of green smoke and dissipated in the emergency room. Alas! Seeing the talisman flame also extinguished, Zhang Fengjai sighed and retracted his gaze, then turned and walked to Zhuang Jian's side. Zhang Fengjai, thank you. After thanking Zhang Fengjai, who was squatting beside her to take Xiao Yuxuan's pulse, Zhuang Jian looked at him with a deep tenderness. If the time when she faced the security uncle in the talent building is counted, Zhang Fengjai has saved her life twice at critical moments, which made her feel infinitely grateful, and suddenly she had the idea of repaying him with her body. Of course, her way of repaying with her body did not expect to be able to marry Zhang Fengjai in the end. She just hoped that Zhang Fengjai could spend a night with her when he was free. To put it bluntly, they were just underground lovers without any status. Because she had long known that Zhang Fengjai already had a legitimate girlfriend, Sulitzi, and that the two of them had a very deep relationship and would get married sooner or later. After retracting his fingers from Xiao Yuxuan's wrist, Zhang Fengjai took out a silver needle from his sleeve, and then slowly inserted it into the Shenting acupointment between her eyebrows, stimulating the acupointment to awaken her consciousness in a state of unconsciousness. When the silver needle was pulled out of the Shenting acupointment, Xiao Yuxuan slowly opened her eyes, with a confused look in her eyes. However, when she saw Zhang Fengjai with a concerned look on his face, she immediately thought of her dead sister. Tears welled up instantly, and she struggled to stand up immediately, then rushed directly to Xiao Yusi, who was lying quietly on the ground, and cried in grief. Yusi. When she saw that Xiao Yuxuan fainted again because of the heavy grief in her heart, Zhang Fengjai did not continue to use the silver needle to wake her up, but bent down and picked her up, and then ordered Zhuang Jian. Teacher Zhuang, please drive us back to Brother Zhu's villa. Okay. While nodding in agreement, Zhuang Jian also bent down to pick up Xiao Yusi's body, and then left the emergency room first. After putting Xiao Yusi's body in the back of the business car, Zhuang Jian signaled Zhang Fengjai, who was also in the car, to wait for a moment, took out her mobile phone and made a call outside the car, and then drove away from the affiliated hospital quickly. About 3 minutes after the SUV left the hospital, a silver-white sedan drove into the affiliated hospital and parked in the emergency parking space of the emergency building. Then, a handsome young man in a white coat, extraordinary temperament and a hint of arrogance between his eyebrows, stepped out of the sedan. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 272. In front of the emergency building of the affiliated hospital. That's not right. After a quick glance at the quiet hospital, the arrogant young man's eyes flashed with a hint of doubt, and he whispered to himself. According to the time calculation, the residual soul in the girl's sea of consciousness should have devoured the 3 souls and 6 spirits to upgrade to the state of the resentful spirit, and then started to kill. Why is it so quiet around? After closing his eyes and opening them again, the arrogant young man's originally deep and charming eyes gradually turned red and looked up at the emergency building. When he saw the resentment and evil spirits on the 3rd floor constantly dissipating, he frowned and immediately quickened his pace to rush into the emergency building, and quickly came to the emergency room through the stairs. When he saw the 2 doctors and 3 nurses lying in a pool of blood, as well as the medical equipment and countless glass fragments scattered all over the floor, but there was no girl whose body was occupied by the resentful spirit, his face changed slightly, and he immediately cut his finger and squeezed out a drop of blood. Then, he threw the blood directly into the air, and his 10 fingers began to condense marks quickly, and he chanted a spell softly. Blood resentment turns into spirit, return to the origin. As the marks condensed by the arrogant young man merged into the blood automatically exploded into countless blood mists. Then, countless blood mists slowly gathered together and gradually condensed into a blood-colored mirror. Then, the arrogant young man stretched out his slender jade-like fingers and quickly grabbed the position where Zhang Fenjai, Zhuang Jian, and Xiao Yuxuan had just stood. In the SUV business car, Zhang Fenjai, who was holding Xiao Yuxuan in the back seat, listened carefully to Zhuang Jian's description of Rong Xiangtian's actions after he left the outpatient building. After a detailed examination at the hospital and confirming that Rong Moyun was in good health, Rong Xiangtian used a private plane to take Rong Moyun, Rong Mok, and Luo Rong back to the imperial capital overnight. And she stayed in the hospital to deal with the follow-up matters, which is why she was able to discover the existence of the resentful spirit and appeared in the emergency room in time. Although Rong Xiangtian did not take any retaliatory actions until he left the hospital on a private plane, Zhuang Jian, with her super sensitivity as a cultivator, could feel his strong hatred for Zhang Fenjai. Based on her knowledge of the Rong family's power and connections in the imperial capital, combined with Rong Xiangtian's vindictive character, she guessed that Rong Xiangtian would not only not give up the idea of revenge, but would also arrange a thunder-like assassination. After hearing Zhuang Jian's explanation and guess, Zhang Fenjai not only did not have the slightest fear, but a sneer of disdain flashed across his face. Although his current cultivation is not very high, with the top medicinal materials that Rong Xiangtian kept his promise to send, he is confident that he can achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation in a short time and perform some powerful Taoist methods that can challenge the level above. At the same time, taking advantage of the opportunity to return to the Zhang family in Shushan during the Mid-Autumn Festival, he can either ask the special beings in Shushan to give him a more powerful life-saving trump card again, or secretly steal the talismans and real magic tools collected by the third grandfather. By then, even if Rong Xiangtian could invite more strong men in the foundation building realm, he would have the means to protect himself and fight back, and even sneak into the imperial capital to destroy the entire Rong family. Zhang Fenjai, why don't you join our supernatural research institute? Zhuang Jian, who didn't know the strength behind Zhang Fenjai, was worried about the dangerous situation he was about to face, so she invited him sincerely. As long as you are willing to join the Supernatural Research Institute, with your talent and potential, as well as your ability to master yin and yang, 5 elements, and feng shui layout, you can not only directly obtain the identity and treatment of a core disciple, but also get a very high status and power. As long as you become a core disciple of the Supernatural Research Institute and a leader with real power, no matter how powerful Rong Xiangtian is, he will never dare to hurt or retaliate against the people in the institute. Not good. Facing Zhuang Jian's third invitation, Zhang Fenjai shook his head and planned to continue to refuse. The warning from his sixth sense suddenly made him change his face and immediately reached out to pull out a strand of Xiao Yuxuan's hair. Although affected by the cause and effect relationship, the cultivator cannot calculate his own fate, but he can calculate the fortune of the people around him and in turn mark the dangers he may encounter. Moreover, he has a very strong feeling in his heart that the warning from the sixth sense just now must be related to the vengeful spirit just killed. Therefore, he will use Xiao Yuxuan's hair to calculate her future fortune and use it to check the danger represented by the warning. Mirror image, breath tracking, evil spirit rushing to the top, bloody disaster. When he got Xiao Yuxuan's future fortune and the reason for this fortune, Zhang Fenjai immediately guessed the danger represented by the warning from the sixth sense. That is, the evil doctor who hurt Xiao Yuxi's soul and forced the residual soul to forcibly upgrade to a vengeful spirit is collecting the breath of Xiao Yuxuan, Zhuang Jian, and him in the rescue room, and then using a special mirror secret method to show their clear images. The ability to use the secret method of mirror image requires at least the cultivation level of the foundation building realm. Although he had the life-saving poison pill given by Shui Yunhan, he was not afraid of the other party's revenge, but considering the safety of Xiao Yuxuan and Zhuang Jian, he had to find a way to destroy the other party's mirror image secret method of tracking breath. Teacher Zhuang, stop the car. At the moment when Zhang Fenjai cried out that it was not good, Zhuang Jian was ready to stop the car at any time, so when she heard Zhang Fenjai's order, she turned the steering wheel and parked the car on the side of the road. Immediately afterwards, Zhang Fenjai handed Xiao Yuxuan to Zhuang Jian, and then took out 3 copper coins from his sleeves, as well as an evil breaking talisman, a soul calming talisman and an evil breaking talisman. Place the 3 charms on the chair respectively, and press a copper coin on top of each charm, then cut your finger and force out 3 drops of blood, and drip them into the money holes in the middle of the 3 copper coins. Then, he took a deep breath, and began to quickly condense marks with his fingers, and merged the condensed marks into the blood. The moment the mark blended into the blood, the originally warm blood immediately began to boil. As the blood boiled, 3 black gases full of evil auras slowly rose up. This made Zhuang Jian, who had been paying attention to Zhang Fenjai's spell casting, couldn't help but change her face, and directly mobilized her spiritual power to protect her and Xiao Yuxuan. Zhang Fenjai suddenly clapped his hands together and dispersed the 3 black gases. Zhang Fenjai shouted loudly, "Destroy evil, destroy traces of evil, cut off energy, cut off breath, and cut off fate." Just as Zhang Fenjai used force to disperse the 3 strands of black gas, the arrogant young man in the rescue room stretched out the 10 fingers where they once stood, and quickly retracted them as if he had been shocked. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 273. In the emergency room of the emergency building. Damn it! He suddenly retracted his 10 fingers and rubbed them vigorously in his palms to relieve the pain. The arrogant young man cursed with a gloomy face. Then, he turned around and walked to the 2 doctors and 3 nurses who were lying in a pool of blood. Using the scalpel that fell on the ground, he opened their chests and took out the hearts that had stopped beating long ago. Immediately afterwards, he placed the 5 hearts on the operating table in a 5-pointed star arrangement, and then sat cross-legged on the heart position with his knees bent. After taking a deep breath and exhaling it slowly, the arrogant young man began to quickly condense marks on his 10 fingers, and integrated the condensed marks into his 5 hearts. When the heart behind him merged into the last mark, the 5 hearts suddenly floated in the air, and then quickly spun around the arrogant young man. As the 5 hearts rotated faster and faster, the remaining blood in the heart was forcibly thrown out, and then a layer of blood gradually formed on the head of the arrogant young man. Looking up at the increasingly rich blood curtain, the arrogant young man took out a python jade pendant carved from sapphire from his sleeve, with a look of reluctance in his eyes. After closing his eyes and reopening them, the reluctance in his eyes was replaced by determination. The arrogant young man cut his finger and forced out a drop of blood, which was blended into the jade pendant of the python statue, and then he threw the jade pendant directly towards the blood curtain above his head. Then, the jade pendant of the python statue disappeared into the blood curtain. SUV business car. After using the copper coins, talismans and his own blood to eliminate the aura remaining in the rescue room, Zhang Fenjai breathed a sigh of relief and reached out to put away the copper coins and talismans. But at this moment, the charms and copper coins placed on the leather seat suddenly floated into the air, and then flew out of the car, smashing the window. Seeing the 3 talismans outside the car wrapped in copper coins and automatically burning in a triangular arrangement, Zhang Jiyi couldn't help but give instructions to Zhuang Jian with a sudden expression on his face. "Teacher Zhuang, drive out of here quickly." Without the slightest hesitation, she threw Xiao Yuxuan directly to Zhang Fenjai. Zhuang Jian immediately ignited the commercial vehicle and put it into gear, then stepped on the accelerator and accelerated away. Just as the business car started to accelerate away, a gap suddenly opened in the triangular space where the talisman and the copper coin were combined, and then a jade pendant with a python statue flew out from the gap. At the moment when the python jade pendant flew out, a low and magnetic roar came from the gap in the space. The demon god is possessed, and the blood soul is transformed. Accompanied by a deep roar, the python statue carved from sapphire suddenly came to life. It shook its delicate and small head, then raised its head and glanced at the commercial vehicle that was speeding away. A cold light flashed in its cold and small eyes, and it raised its head to the sky and let out a low roar. Hiss! Along with the low roar, the python, which was originally only 3 or 4 centimeters in length, quickly grew bigger and thicker like a balloon, and the fierce aura exuding from its body became stronger and stronger. In just 3 seconds, the python's body length had exceeded 20 meters, and its ferocious aura reached the foundation building realm. Then, the python vigorously swung its thick tail and quickly chased the commercial vehicle at a speed that was not inferior to that of a sports car. Fortunately, it was already past 1 o'clock in the morning. Not only were there no pedestrians on the road, but there were also very few passing vehicles, which did not cause any confusion. Zhang Fengjai, who witnessed the python's transformation through the rear window, turned to Zhuang Jian with a solemn expression and gave instructions. Teacher Zhuang, go directly to the highway and go to Shushan in Fangshan Town, Fuku City. The poisonous elixir presented by Shui Yunhan is mainly aimed at creatures with souls and flesh and blood. The python that was chasing the commercial vehicle was transformed through the combination of thoughts, spiritual power, spells and sapphire. The poison pill had no great effect on it at all. At the same time, the python transformed from the sapphire statue not only reached the foundation building stage, but also exuded a fierce aura that was far stronger than Wang Xishan and Li Tianyu from the institute. This means that the true strength of the python is likely to reach the 2nd level of foundation building, or even the 3rd level of foundation building. When the life-saving trump card lost its effect of threatening the opponent and he could not rely on feng shui layout in a short period of time, Zhang Fengjai had no choice but to retreat to Mao's mountain and let the 3rd grandfather personally destroy the python. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's instructions, Zhuang Jian, who had been observing the python's speed through the rearview mirror, frowned and reminded Zhang Fengjai, this business car is just the most ordinary model, and its top speed is only over 150 per hour. I'm afraid it will take a long time for the python at the foundation level to catch up with us. Teacher Zhuang, just drive. I have a way to slow down that python. While signaling Zhuang Jian to concentrate on speeding up the car, Zhang Fengjai took out a dozen blank talisman papers from his sleeves, as well as the blood of monsters collected in the Yinland. Then, he used the monster's blood and blank talisman paper to quickly draw 18 talismans that could be used to condense objects and transform into shapes. After the bloody battle in Daguan village, the loss of 2 foundation building masters and 5 elite disciples completely deteriorated his relationship with the Supernatural Research Institute. There was no need to continue to cover up the previous period by using the close proximity and coagulation. Shape of Taoism, intercepting the secrets of the ancient Kang sect. So, he did not avoid Zhuang Jian who was driving, and directly opened the window of the business car. After using his spiritual power to drive the talisman in his hand to turn into a cat demon, he jumped out along the window, and then accelerated to meet the rushing python. When she saw the talisman drawn by Zhang Fengjai temporarily condensed a cat demon whose cultivation reached the 3rd level of qi condensation, a look of enlightenment flashed in Zhuang Jian's eyes. At this time, she vaguely guessed that the person who killed Gu Xing of the Gukang sect in front of the Dihao Entertainment City some time ago was not the Kunlun sect and the disciples who went down the mountain to practice in Longhu Mountain as the leaders of the institute guessed, but the peerless boy in front of her who made her willing to be his lover and willing to be his underground lover. Therefore, even if she had guessed it in her heart, Zhuang Jian had no intention of reporting it to her superiors. Although the strength of the cat demon was not worth mentioning in the eyes of the python, the Yinsha Qi contained in the cat demon was just the nemesis of the python transformed by the green jade statue. Therefore, facing the cat demon rushing over quickly, the python had to stop chasing, and then its thick tail directly rolled up a big tree on the roadside and smashed the cat demon with the branches. It took about 6 seconds for the python to stop chasing, roll up the big tree to smash the cat demon, and then swing its tail to continue chasing, which also restored the distance between it and the commercial vehicle to the initial gap. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuchi. Chapter 274. Seeing that the cat demon with sinister aura could indeed hinder the python's pursuit, Zhang Fenjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief and continued to use spiritual power to drive the second talisman to transform into a gray fox. Although the gray fox was not as fast as the cat demon, its cunning and changeable character allowed it to use the surrounding environment to avoid 3 attacks in succession when the python's thick tail rolled up the tree. This also took the python a full 15 seconds to finally destroy the gray fox and then start chasing again. Seeing that the gray fox transformed into a spell was more effective in blocking the pursuit of the python, Zhang Fenjai quickly picked out 3 spells drawn with the blood of the gray fox, and then used spiritual power to drive them every 1 minute. By the time the 3 spells drawn with the gray fox's blood were used up, the python with a body length of more than 20 meters had disappeared from sight, which made him completely relieved. But at this moment, Zhuang Jian, who was concentrating on driving, reminded her with a sudden change of expression. "Oops, the car is almost out of gas." After hearing Zhuang Jian's reminder, Zhang Fenjai couldn't help but asked with a change of expression. "Teacher Zhuang, how much longer can you hold on?" 20 minutes at most," Zhuang Jian glanced at the meter scale and replied. "In 20 minutes, let alone returning to the Zhang family in Rat Mountain, I was afraid that even getting on the highway would be a bit difficult, so Zhang Fenjai could only start to reconsider the way to deal with the python. It was already close to 2 o'clock in the morning. There was not even a passing car on the slightly remote road, so it was impossible to borrow a car temporarily and continue returning to Rat Mountain. Although there was a feng shui pattern suitable for renovation in the urban area, and he had enough fuel left in his commercial vehicle to get there, he lacked the materials and time to reform the feng shui layout, so he could only give up the idea of using feng shui formations to deal with pythons. In a tea house about 5 miles away from the fertilizer factory, there is an evil cultivator named Wu. Although the evil cultivator named Wu's cultivation level is only at the peak of the 9th level of qi condensation, the 5 poisons he carefully cultivated can cause a certain amount of damage to the python. However, generally evil cultivators are relatively selfish. He is worried that the other party will simply abandon the tea house and escape, thus putting him in fatal danger, so he can only give up the plan to kill someone with a borrowed knife. The security guard at the talent building. Although the security uncle possesses the foundation building realm, judging from the auras emanating from each other, not only is he no match for the python, but he is also dragged down by his own speed and may suffer unimaginable damage. Zhang Fenjai, who really couldn't bear to implicate the other party, had no choice but to give up the idea. "Zhang Fenjai, that python is catching up again." Just when Zhang Fenjai was trying his best to think of ways to deal with the python, Zhuang Jian, who had been using the rearview mirror to observe the situation behind him, suddenly saw the python chasing after him as fast as the wind. After seeing the python, he quickly reminded. After hearing Zhuang Jian's reminder, Zhang Fenjai quickly turned his head and took a look. Later, he discovered that the speed of the python's pursuit had not only increased, but the ferocious aura exuding from its body had become stronger. This shows that the evil doctor behind it must have used a special secret technique from a distance. Fierce atmosphere. A flash of inspiration suddenly flashed in his mind, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes, and he quickly gave instructions to Zhuang Jian. "Teacher Zhuang, change lanes immediately and go to the Municipal Public Security Bureau." As the country's law enforcement agency, the Public Security Bureau has the responsibility and power to safeguard national security, strictly prevent, punish and crack down on illegal and criminal activities, and arrest and sanction criminals. Crime represents evil, and stopping crime represents justice. The justice that the Public Security Bureau has accumulated over time has the ability to restrain demons and monsters. At the same time, the law enforcement powers granted by the state and the people, as well as the frequent interactions with criminals all year round, have also created a strong and vicious force in the Public Security Bureau, which can also fully restrain the python transformed from the sapphire statue. However, the power of evil and the energy of justice are static energies that require someone to manipulate them in order to exert deterrence and restraint, and this person cannot be an ordinary policeman. Because the consciousness of ordinary police officers is not strong enough, they cannot withstand the impact of the evil force. In the end, not only will they be unable to exert the power of the evil force, but they will also easily collapse their consciousness and become a vegetative state. Fortunately, when he thought that the Public Security Bureau could deal with the threat of pythons, he had already considered in advance the candidate who could control the power of evil and the spirit of justice, and that was Yang Guozheng, who had just been appointed deputy director. First of all, more than 10 years of police career, training in different positions, and experience in hundreds of cases, large and small, have made his consciousness as tough as a rock, which can completely withstand the impact of evil forces and exert its evil power. All the power. Secondly, impartial law enforcement and integrity allowed him to gradually develop a strong sense of righteousness, which could mobilize the accumulated justice in the police station and give him a fatal threat to the will of the transformed python. Thirdly, the position of deputy director also allows him to disperse all the staff in the police station, so that unnecessary chaos will not be caused by the giant python that is more than 20 meters tall. Zhang Fengjai took out his mobile phone and found Yang Qiushan's number, and dialed it directly. The ringing only lasted twice before the call was connected directly, and then Yang Qiushan's hearty voice rang. "Hello, little friend Zhang." "Chief Yang, where are you now?" Zhang Fengjai asked directly without wasting time on polite greetings. "I'm at the police station. It's my turn to be on duty today." "Chief Yang, immediately disperse all the staff of your police station, and then wait for me at the gate of the police station." "No problem." The call at 2 a.m., the low tone of command, the origin of a Taoist monk, and the 3 supernatural personal experiences made Yang Guozheng immediately realize the seriousness and urgency of the matter. So, he did not ask Zhang Fengjai for the specific reasons for dispersing and waiting. He nodded and agreed, and stood up after hanging up the phone, and then told several colleagues who worked overtime overnight to leave quickly. Although they felt a little strange about Deputy Chief Yang's order, being able to go home early to rest was also their wish after being busy for a long time, so they quickly packed up and left the police station. But there was only one female college student who had just joined the criminal police team, but because she was in a hurry to go to the bathroom, she did not get Yang Qiushan's instructions and accidentally stayed in the police station. After hanging up the call and putting away his phone, Zhang Fengjai turned his head to look at the python that was getting closer and closer. He quickly took out the remaining 14 talismans and began to use the monsters created by the talismans to continue to delay the speed of the python's pursuit. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 275. Thanks to Zhuang Jian's superb driving skills and the empty road conditions, it only took 17 minutes for the commercial vehicle to arrive at the gate of the Municipal Public Security Bureau. At the same time, under the various obstacles of the monsters transformed by the 14 talismans, it took at least 3 minutes for the python transformed from the sapphire statue to catch up to the police station. If you want to make use of the righteousness and evil energy accumulated in the police station, you need to teach Yang Guozheng the manipulation method, and also draw a spell on him that can guide and gather the 2 kinds of energy. 3 minutes seems a bit short. Therefore, when Zhang Fengjai saw Yang Guozheng standing at the gate of the police station, he opened the door and jumped out without waiting for Zhuang Jian to stop the car. "Zhang Xiao, what happened?" Yang Guozheng, who couldn't help but feel nervous when he saw Zhang Fengjai jumping out of the commercial vehicle, hurriedly stepped forward and asked. Director Yang, time is tight, so I'll keep it short on some things. He stretched out his hand to hold Yang Qiushan's arm, and led him into the police station compound again while organizing a verbal explanation. At this moment, there is a python monster with a body length of more than 20 meters. It is chasing after it at accelerating speed. It will only take 3 minutes at most to arrive at the police station. I need you to deal with that monster who is far more powerful. The boa constrictor of Buddha's shadow. Zhang Xiao, are you sure you're not kidding me? The python that was chasing him was not only more than 20 meters long, but also far stronger than the phantom of the Buddha that he had shot. After hearing the shocking information revealed in Zhang Fenjai's explanation, Yang Guozheng asked in disbelief. Director Yang, at around 2 o'clock in the morning, on the territory of your police station, do you think I dare to make a joke to you? Zhang Fenjai asked solemnly, turning to look at Yang Guozheng. Little friend Zhang, what do you need from me? Zhang Fenjai's serious attitude and tone made Yang Guozheng immediately realize that his explanation just now was not a joke to him. At the same time, after several cooperations with supernatural phenomena, he also knew that Zhang Fenjai was an upright and kind-hearted young man who would never harm him. Therefore, he quickly corrected his attitude and prepared to accept Zhang Fenjai's arrangement. Director Yang, since your police officers are responsible for maintaining social order, protecting the safety of the people, and fighting crime, your special profession has allowed you to accumulate a strong sense of justice and evil energy in the police station. Not only did he instantly realize the seriousness of the matter, but he also accepted the task without any fear of danger. The character and courage Yang Guozheng showed at this time made Zhang Fenjai feel very respected, and he also quickly expressed his plan. So, next I will teach you the means to manipulate the energy of justice and evil, and then draw a spell on your forehead, chest, and back that can condense the energy. Being able to manipulate the energy of justice and evil means possessing supernatural power. This made Yang Guozheng feel extremely excited, and he quickly took off his shirt as a sign. Little friend Zhang, let's start. Director Yang, listen carefully. After telling Yang Guozheng in detail how to manipulate the energy of justice and evil in plain language, Zhang Fenjai directly cut his finger and forced out a drop of blood. First, he drew a soul-fixing charm on his forehead, between his eyebrows, that could protect his 3 souls and 7 souls, preventing evil forces from harming his consciousness. Then he forced out a second drop of blood and drew a power-gathering spell on his chest that could guide the energy of justice. The one who finally forced out the third drop of blood drew an evil-breaking spell on his back that could gather evil energy. But neither Yang Guozheng, who was immersed in learning justice and evil energy manipulation methods, nor Zhang Fenjai, who was concentrating on drawing spells, noticed that behind the glass door of the office building behind him, stood a man over 1.7 meters tall with a high nose and skin as smooth as gel. A hot, young, and beautiful policewoman. At this time, she was looking at them dumbfounded, with a look of disbelief in her eyes. After drawing 3 talismans with different effects, Zhang Fenjai signaled Yang Guozheng to get dressed quickly, mobilized his spiritual power to open his eyes, and began to observe the environment of the police station. Finally, he found the most suitable location for Yang Guozheng to gather and manipulate the energy of justice and evil in the area between the flagpole and the office building. The only pity is that the flag on the flagpole has been put away. Otherwise, with the national consciousness and cohesion contained in the flag, the python transformed by the sapphire statue can be used to severely injure and kill the evil doctor who controls the python. Then, he raised his head and looked outside the police station. His eyes immediately noticed that there was an aura of evil accelerating approaching thousands of meters away. This made Zhang Fenjai know that in only 20 seconds at most, the python transformed from the sapphire statue will come. Director Yang, please be safe. After retracting his gaze that paid attention to the evil aura, Zhang Fenjai told Yang Guozheng, then retreated directly to the steps of the office building, and then took out the remaining 10 blank talisman papers and the monster's blood from his sleeves. Taking advantage of the 15 seconds before the python transformed by the sapphire statue arrived at the police station, he used the blood of the gray fox to quickly draw 10 talismans that could condense objects into shapes, preparing to delay the python's attack. Seeing the thin boy squatting on the steps drawing spells and the beautiful policewoman standing behind the glass door, a look of disgust and dissatisfaction immediately flashed in her eyes. As a newly graduated college student, her worldview is still scientific, and she does not believe that there are demons and monsters in the world. As a newly employed police officer, she is at the age and mentality that she is most looking forward to personally cracking down on illegal and criminal cases. And Zhang Fengjai, a quack who cheats the people, is the target of their severe crackdown. What's more, the other party dared to make props for cheating in the police station openly, which is a naked provocation to their police. So, after immediately putting on a serious look, the female police officer was about to severely stop and criticize Zhang Fengjai, when she suddenly heard a very creepy scream in her ears, which made her look up. Then, her face turned pale and she took a few steps back in succession, and her eyes showed a look of horror. Because at the gate of the police station at this moment, there was a huge green python entrenched. Because the chasing python suddenly appeared at the gate of the police station, it immediately attracted Zhang Fengjai's vigilance, and he did not notice the beautiful female police officer behind the glass door. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 276. Municipal Public Security Bureau. Perhaps it was because he felt that the justice and evil energy accumulated in the police station was too strong, or perhaps because the evil doctor who controlled the python from the air was afraid of the police station. The green python entrenched in front of the police station door did not rush in immediately, but stared at Yang Guozheng and Zhang Fengjai standing in front of the office building with its striped eyes exuding a cold aura. Whether it was the strong visual impact brought by the body length of more than 20 meters, or the psychological pressure caused by the cold eyes staring at him, Yang Guozheng's endurance reached the limit. He swallowed hard, then turned to look at Zhang Fengjai, who had a solemn expression, and asked with a trembling voice. Little friend Zhang, are you sure that the method you just taught can deal with this giant cyan python in front of you? Director Yang, you and I have known each other for a long time. When have you ever seen me deceive others? He could understand Yang Guozheng's fear and nervousness when facing the python, so Zhang Fengjai could only try his best to comfort him to avoid excessive fear and nervousness, which would ultimately affect his use of justice and evil energy. What's more, you are still my savior, how could I possibly harm you? Zhang Fengjai's comfort gradually calmed down the fear in Yang Guozheng's heart. Then, he thought about his responsibilities and obligations as a policeman, and felt ashamed of his fear and nervousness just now, and then felt angry, so he suddenly raised his head and glared at the green python staring at him. Hiss! A mere mortal dared to provoke him regardless of life and death. This anger instantly replaced the fearful python. After raising its huge python head and roaring, he stepped directly through the automatic shrinking door at the door and rushed towards Yang Guozheng with murderous intent. Slay the demons and bring justice. Subduing the dragon and subduing the tiger, possessing the evil spirit. The moment the python rushed into the police station, Zhang Fengjai, who had been prepared for a long time, shouted twice and quickly integrated the condensed mark into the charm drawn on Yang Guozheng's chest and back. Immediately afterwards, a dazzling white light suddenly emerged from the office building behind Yang Guozheng, and poured directly into his body through the talisman on his chest. At the same time, countless grey gases suddenly emerged from the concrete floor under Yang Guozheng's feet, pouring directly into his body through the talisman on his back. This is. Seeing the white light and grey gas pouring into the leader's body crazily, the policewoman behind the glass door couldn't help but open her mouth wide, with a look of extreme shock in her eyes. It takes a certain amount of time to gather the energy of justice and evil, and it also takes a certain amount of time to become familiar with and manipulate the energy. Therefore, after shouting hoarsely, he immediately picked up the 10 charms he had just drawn using the blood of the gray fox, and then used spiritual power to drive them at the same time. Then, 10 lively gray foxes scattered and rushed towards the giant cyan python, which also made the look of shock in the eyes of the policewoman behind the glass door even more intense. Because the evil energy in the gray fox's body could harm the transformed body of the sapphire statue, the python suddenly stopped its sprinting body when faced with the 10 gray foxes that were rushing towards them. Then, it used its thick python tail to roll up a warning sign next to it, and began to stop and kill the gray fox that kept bullying it. Director Yang, don't panic. Feel the 2 energies in your body calmly and attentively, and then communicate with them most intimately, and win their trust. Then you can use the method I just taught you to mobilize justice and evil. Energy. Taking advantage of the gap between the gray fox to prevent the python from approaching, Zhang Fengjai appeared beside Yang Guo's hung. He found that his brows were furrowed tightly and there was a trace of anxiety in his eyes. He immediately guessed that he must be unable to control the sudden surge of blood in his body. Feeling anxious due to the incoming righteous and evil energy. I could understand his anxious mood, so Zhang Fengjai tried to keep his tone as relaxed as possible to comfort and remind him. Under Zhang Fengjai's comfort, Yang Qiushan's anxious mood gradually calmed down, and he slowly closed his eyes. With Zhang Fengjai's detailed reminder, he was gradually able to communicate with the 2 energies in his body. Seeing that Yang Guo's hung was able to master the use of sensing justice and vicious energy in such a short period of time, Zhang Fengjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief, looked up at the python that was being besieged by the gray fox, and couldn't help but frown. Wrinkled. Because compared to the road with trees and deep ditches on both sides, the slightly empty police station compound made the 10 gray foxes lose the advantage of taking advantage of the terrain. At the same time, the warning sign rolled up by the thick python tail is not only smaller and sharper, but the speed and severity of the attack are far stronger than that of the big tree. Therefore, in less than a minute, 4 gray foxes were killed by the warning signs. Without the slightest hesitation, Zhang Fengjai immediately mobilized the spiritual power of his dantian to condense a sharp sword. When he returned to the office building, he threw the sharp sword into the air, pinched the sword with his fingers, and shouted loudly. Heaven and earth are infinite, and the universe borrows the law. Under the control of the sword art, the sharp sword with condensed spiritual power relies on its speed and attack power, and then cooperates with the siege of 6 gray foxes to specifically attack the vital points of the python, forcing the python to dodge as much as possible and have to use the warning signs to carry out the attack. Withstand. However, due to the difference in strength between them and the python's natural ferocity, after the initial panic, the python, whose anger constantly stimulated its ferocity, finally gave up its defense and let the sword sneak attack, and then tried its best to kill the 6 gray foxes that threatened it. Since the python gave up its defense, Zhang Fengjai did not show any courtesy to it and controlled the sword, stabbing it directly at its vital point, 7 inches. Bang! However, although the sword successfully pierced the 7-inch position of the abdomen, due to the terrifying physical defense and the huge difference in strength between them, the sword not only did not pierce the skin of the abdomen, but because of the strong rebound force of the defense, it almost shattered the sword condensed by spiritual power, which forced him to quickly retract and disperse the sword. Turning his head to look at Yang Guo's hung, who still had not completely mastered the justice and fierce energy, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a look of heartache, and he took out 16 talismans that had been drawn from his sleeves. Afterwards, he used his spiritual power to erase the spell on the talisman paper, and then used the cat demon's blood to redraw 16 talismans that could condense objects and transform into shapes. Then, he used his spiritual power to drive the talisman to transform into 16 cat demons, allowing them to use their speed advantage and cooperate with the remaining 6 gray foxes to continue to buy enough time for Yang Guo's Hung to master the energy of justice and evil. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 277. Municipal Public Security Bureau. Perhaps because it felt that the increasing energy in Yang Guoxian's body could bring fatal danger to itself, the python used the advantages of its thick python tail and warning sign to prevent the cat demon and the gray fox from approaching, and then continued to approach Yang Guo's Hung with the speed of its upper body swinging. This also made Zhang Fenjai's face change, and he had to grit his teeth and use his spiritual power to condense a sharp sword again, and then directly rushed over Yang Guo's Hung to the python. Simply using the sword to control the sword will definitely reduce the attack power. The attack with a sharp sword can not only fully exert the power of the sword, but also has the coordination of the flesh and blood of steel and iron bones, and the power of the attack is at least 30%. Therefore, using the speed of the Qingfeng step to easily avoid the attack of the warning sign, Zhang Fenjai went around the back of the python, and the sharp sword in his hand directly pierced the flesh defense on the back of the python. Puff. As the sharp sword pierced into the body of the python, the pain formed instantly made the python raise its head and roar. Hiss. After roaring to the sky, the python suddenly had a humane sneer in its striped eyes, and then it opened its bloody mouth and bit Zhang Fenjai. Facing the bloody mouth biting at him, Zhang Fenjai did not panic at all and quickly retreated with the Qingfeng step, and used his mind to order the remaining gray foxes and cat demons to speed up their attacks. But what was completely beyond his expectation was that in the face of the remaining 6 gray foxes and the siege of 16 cat demons, the python not only did not immediately defend and counterattack, but its thick tail directly dropped the warning sign. Then, the python's tail swung rapidly with the body, and it suddenly burst out at a speed beyond the wind, and quickly swallowed him. Until this moment, Zhang Fenjai suddenly realized that he had made a fatal mistake, or that he had fallen into the trap of the python, that is, the python controlled by the evil doctor, broke into the police station because it was chasing him. The reason why he was afraid of and approached Yang Guo's Hung just now was not only because the justice and evil energy that flowed into his body could threaten the safety of the python, but also because he was standing behind him just now, which forced the python to deal with him head-on. At this time, he took the risk of approaching the python, not only to prevent it from a head-on conflict with Yang Guo's Hung, but also to give it a chance to kill him. At this moment, the gap in strength and speed made him have neither the means to fight back against the opponent nor the ability to avoid being swallowed, and he could only watch the bloody mouth of the python swallowing him. No. Although he followed Zhang Fenjai's instructions and stayed in the business car to take care of Xiao Yuxuan who had fainted, Zhuang Jian had been paying attention to the situation outside the car. When she saw Zhang Fenjai, who was already unable to dodge, about to be swallowed by the bloody mouth of the python, Zhuang Jian suddenly cried out in grief. The female police officer behind the glass door immediately stretched out her right hand to cover her eyes, unable to bear to continue watching. Evildoer, stop being so arrogant. Just as the python opened its bloody mouth and was about to swallow Zhang Fenjai, who had no ability to fight back or dodge, Yang Guo's Hung suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, then slashed the python's position in the air with his right palm. Then, a grey long knife appeared out of thin air above the python and slashed heavily on its body. Puff. Accompanied by a tearing sound, the grey long knife that appeared out of thin air directly cut the python in half. The weightlessness caused by losing half of its body in an instant, and the impact of severe pain on consciousness, made the python unable to help but close its bloody mouth, while its sharp teeth passed by Zhang Fenjai's ear. The relief after escaping death made Zhang Fenjai couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. But thinking of the consequences of being almost swallowed just now, he was furious and stabbed the python's head with his sword, and ordered the remaining gray foxes and cat demons to join the siege. Damn it! Just as the sword in Zhang Fenjai's hand was about to pierce the huge head of the python suddenly raised its head to avoid the sword attack, cursed in human language, and fled to the gate of the police station with half of its body swinging. "Don't even think about escaping." Seeing the python desperately escaping, Zhang Fenjai shouted loudly and immediately used the Qingfeng step to pursue it. But at this moment, Yang Qiushan's confident voice suddenly came from behind. "Friend Zhang, leave this monster to me." Accompanied by Yang Qiushan's confident voice, a milky white longsword appeared out of thin air at the gate of the police station and pierced the python's head directly at lightning speed. In the emergency room of the emergency building of the affiliated hospital. At the moment when the python was stabbed to death by the milky white longsword, the arrogant young man who was sitting cross-legged on the operating table spit out 3 mouthfuls of blood in succession, and his face instantly turned pale as paper and lay on the operating table. "Damn kid, damn police, Master Qiandao, will never let you go." He took out a palm-sized ginseng from his sleeve, chewed it and swallowed it directly, then sat up with his hands barely supporting himself, and then looked up at the blood curtain that was getting lighter and lighter in color. He gritted his teeth and cursed, then continued to sit with his knees bent and began to heal his wounds. The wound was only recovered by less than 10%, Master Qiandao opened his eyes and reluctantly walked off the operating table, and then walked out of the operating room with difficulty. As a teacher at the medical school and a surgeon at the affiliated hospital, he knew that it would not be long before the doctors and nurses on duty would come to check the emergency room. If they saw the dead doctor and nurse, and the 5 hearts that fell on the operating table, they would definitely call the police immediately, thus alerting Zhuang Jian, who was in charge of the supernatural scene in Ningji City. At that time, he would be unable to speak, and he would most likely fall into the hands of the Supernatural Research Institute, and the result would be unpredictable. Therefore, he could only risk delaying his seriously injured body and leaving the affiliated hospital with difficulty. In the police station compound. Seeing the python being stabbed to death by Yang Guozheng with the longsword condensed by the energy of justice, Zhang Fenjai was completely relieved, and waved his hand to disperse the grey fox and cat demon transformed by the talisman, and then turned to Yang Qiushan's instructions. "Director Yang, the python has been killed, the danger is lifted, you can disperse the justice and evil energy gathered in your body. Little friend Zhang, can I keep the 2 energies in my body? The sword can be condensed by the mind, and the monster can be killed with a wave of the hand." The experience of killing the blue giant python easily and domineeringly just now has made Yang Guozheng deeply fascinated by this omnipotent power. So, when faced with Zhang Fenjai's order, a look of reluctance immediately flashed across his face, and then he asked with anticipation in his eyes. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 278. Municipal Public Security Bureau. No. After flatly rejecting Yang Qiushan's request, Zhang Fenjai warned him sternly. "Director Yang, if you don't want to become a vegetable forever lying on the hospital bed, then you should continue to keep the 2 energies in your body. In fact, whether it is the justice that Heiran always has or the violent evil power, they are all supernatural energies. If ordinary people master them for a long time, it will not only cause serious damage to the body, but also hurt the soul of the sea of consciousness, which is why he warns so sternly." After hearing Zhang Fenjai's warning, Yang Guozheng couldn't help but shudder, and then immediately dispersed the justice and evil energy gathered in his body. Zhang Fenjai also took the opportunity to use his spiritual power to wipe out the 3 talismans drawn on his body. At the moment when the justice and evil energy dissipated, the weakness and powerlessness that suddenly hit his body, as well as the dizziness in his mind, made Yang Guozheng fall directly. Fortunately, Zhang Fenjai, who had anticipated the situation, reached out to catch Yang Guozheng in time, and then helped him sit on the steps in front of the office building. While using the finger massage of acupoints to help him recover, he reminded him with a serious look. "Director Yang, see it? Even under the protection of the talisman I drew, the result of dispersing the energy has already made you weak and powerless. If you continue to keep the energy of justice and evil in your body, when the energy is exhausted, turning into a vegetable is probably the best result. In serious cases, you may directly turn into a pile of mud that no one can recognize. After the massage of acupoints, Yang Guozheng gradually regained consciousness. After hearing Zhang Fenji's reminder, a trace of fear flashed in his eyes and asked, "Friend Zhang, if you encounter such a thing in the future, I hope you don't come to me again. Let's talk about it later." For the first time, seeing that the justice and evil energy accumulated by the police station was so powerful, how could Zhang Fenji easily let go of the means to turn the tables and save his life? So, in the face of Yang Guoshan's request, he dealt with it vaguely, then stood up and walked to the body of the python that had just been cut off. However, the half of the python body that was nearly 10 meters long disappeared, replaced by half of the jade pendant of the green jade python statue. After bending down to pick up the half of the jade pendant on the ground, he picked up the other half of the jade pendant at the gate of the police station, and then merged the two halves of the jade pendant together. Just when the two halves of the jade pendant just touched each other, an extremely fierce breath suddenly emerged from the jade pendant, and the jade pendant in his hand almost slipped out of his hand. After quickly separating the merged jade pendant, Zhang Fenji's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise, and he put away the two halves of the jade pendant, then turned around and returned to Yang Guozheng and asked, "Director Yang, my car is out of gasoline, can you find a way to get some?" Considering Yang Guoshan's serious and responsible attitude, Zhang Fenji didn't want to waste words and time explaining to him because of the body in the business car and the unconscious Xiao Yuxuan. So, he still planned to get some gasoline and continue to drive the business car away. "I just happen to have a spare barrel of gasoline in my car, you can use it first," pointing to the parking lot at the easternmost end of the police station. Yang Guozheng took out the car keys and replied, "Teacher Zhuang, go to Director Yang's car to get gasoline." Zhang Fenji turned his head and gave instructions to Zhuang Jian in the business car, preparing to continue to massage his acupoints so that he could return to normal as soon as possible. But just after Zhuang Jian opened the door and got out of the car, Yang Guozheng stood up suddenly, and then saluted respectfully. "Hello, Chief. Chief Yang, thank you for your strong support without fear of life threatening just now. I will report your contribution today to the leader and give you the reward you deserve." Zhuang Jian instantly put on a majestic posture and praised and encouraged in a leader's tone. Although Yang Guoshan's address and attitude towards Zhuang Jian were completely beyond Zhang Fenji's expectations, he didn't like it in his heart, and even hated their way of talking between superiors and subordinates. So, after glaring at Zhuang Jian, Zhang Fenji turned around and continued to massage Yang Guoshan's acupoints. When Zhuang Jian finished refueling the car and drove the car to the front of the office building, Yang Guozheng, who had undergone a acupointment massage, also completely recovered. "Director Yang, see you later." When he turned around and was about to walk towards the business car with a wave of his hand, Yang Guozheng suddenly spoke to keep him. "Zhang Xiao, wait a moment." "Director Yang, is there anything else?" "Zhang Xiao, have you been free recently?" Yang Guozheng asked with expectation in his eyes. Seeing the expectant look in Yang Guoshan's eyes, Zhang Fenji knew that it must be bad news, and instinctively wanted to shake his head to deny it. But thinking about the other party risking his life twice to help him kill the Buddha's phantom and the green python, the gratitude in his heart finally made him nod and reply truthfully. "Yes. Zhang Xiao, I have two very difficult cases on hand. I want to trouble you to take a look," Yang Guozheng asked nervously. "Director Yang, can I come back to help you after the Mid-Autumn Festival?" Zhang Fenji asked with a frown. After tonight's escape, Zhang Fenji has fully realized the importance of a life-saving trump card. If it weren't for the life-saving trump cards given by those special beings in Shushan, he would not be able to intimidate Zhang Huijing, who had advanced to the realm, and he would not be able to persuade her to give up the idea of revenge. If he hadn't had the life-saving trump card given by the special beings in Shushan, he wouldn't have been able to severely injure the security uncle in the Foundation building realm, allowing Zhuang Jian to successfully capture the cat demon alive and rescue Rong Moyun. If he hadn't had the life-saving trump card given by the special beings in Shushan, he wouldn't have been able to kill Li Tianyu, who escaped from the formation blockade, and he might have suffered revenge from her after she escaped. If he still had the life-saving trump card given by the special beings in Shushan, then when facing the pursuit of the blue giant python, he wouldn't have needed to flee desperately, and he could have solved the threat of the blue giant python on the spot. Therefore, in the 4 days before returning to the Zhang family in Shushan for the holiday, he decided to either stay in the villa in Guanghe Huafu or stay in the apartment in Jin's Landing, and try not to cause trouble with supernatural creatures. No problem. As long as Zhang Fengjai is willing to help, it doesn't matter how early or late it is, so Yang Guozheng quickly nodded in agreement. Turning around and opening the car door and sitting in the car, Zhang Fengjai signaled Zhuang Jian to drive away quickly. Watching the business car slowly driving away from the police station, Yang Guozheng took a deep breath and turned to walk into the office building. However, a figure suddenly flashed in the hall, causing him to change his expression and shout sternly. "Who is it?" "You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 279. Municipal Public Security Bureau. Director Yang, it's me, Huang Yiwen. The female police officer who successfully hid in the dark corridor could only walk out helplessly after seeing that she had been discovered by Yang Guozheng. Seeing Huang Yiwen coming out of the dark corridor, Yang Guozheng immediately shouted nervously. "Huang Yiwen, why are you still in the police station? Whether it is the green giant python with a body length of more than 20 meters, or the weapon condensed by Zhang Fengjai's help to him to master justice and evil energy, they are all supernatural phenomena that ordinary people have never known or seen. If what happened tonight is spread and used by someone with ulterior motives, it will easily shake his unstable position as deputy director by promoting futile mistakes, and it will also affect his next plan to solve the unjust case. Director Yang, I have to work overtime today." Huang Yiwen lowered her head and explained in a low voice. "Didn't I let you leave work early?" Yang Guozheng continued to shout with a frown. "I just went to the bathroom because I felt uncomfortable, so I didn't hear your order. Come to my office." Since it was his negligence that caused Huang Yiwen to stay in the police station, Yang Guozheng was embarrassed to continue to scold her coldly. But in order to ensure that what happened tonight would not be leaked, he had to specifically warn the other party. So, while Yang Guozheng walked towards the elevator, he gave instructions to Huang Yiwen, who was lowering her head and grabbing her clothes. In Villa number 7 of Guanghe Huafu. Looking at Xiao Yuxuan holding Xiao Yuxi's hands tightly, her eyes revealing tenderness as she recounted the bits and pieces of their life together, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sigh and leave the room, and went directly to the lobby on the first floor. "Teacher Zhuang, what would you like to drink?" After opening the refrigerator on the first floor, he reached out and picked up a bottle of high-proof liquor, and turned his head to ask Zhuang Jian, who was sitting on the sofa. "Give me a bottle of white wine too." Turning her head to look at the various famous wines in the refrigerator, Zhuang Jian's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look, and she also asked for a bottle of white wine exactly the same as the one in Zhang Fengjai's hand. "Come on, let's go." Raising the bottle in his hand, Zhang Fengjai invited her to drink first. He drank nearly half a bottle of wine in one breath, and waited until Zhuang Jian finished drinking the same way, and then he asked solemnly. "Teacher Zhuang, I wonder how your Supernatural Research Institute plans to deal with me next. 2 strong men in the Foundation building realm and 5 young disciples at the elite level are not weeds on the roadside or cabbages in the vegetable garden. They can be killed just by saying so. At this time, there are less than 4 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival. He needs to understand the attitude of the Supernatural Research Institute towards him in advance in order to decide the next response plan. Although Zhuang Jian's strong physique makes her drink well, drinking nearly half a caddy of high-proof white wine in one breath still makes her fair face flushed, and she looks at Zhang Fengjai with a touch of emotion in her eyes as she explains. It's still a fierce argument, and there is no final result yet. Zhang Fengjai didn't quite understand the approach of the Supernatural Research Institute, so he didn't notice the emotion in Zhuang Jian's eyes. He frowned slightly and continued to ask. Teacher Zhuang, why are you arguing? When will there be a final result? Factional disputes and interest competition, who knows when they can discuss the final result? After a flash of disdainful sneer in her eyes, Zhuang Jian said sarcastically in a helpless tone. Then, she raised the bottle in her hand and gestured. Come on, let's go one more. Zhang Fengjai raised the bottle and drank the white wine slowly, and a thoughtful look gradually appeared in his eyes. Because Zhuang Jian's sarcasm just now reminded him of what he saw and heard in Yongsheng Group, he could vaguely guess that the Supernatural Research Institute, which was tainted with the vulgarity of the world, might also have many mountains like Yongsheng Group. No. It might even be more complicated and more sinister than the factional struggle of Yongsheng Group. After all, possessing supernatural powers means being able to control more power and gain more benefits. Thinking of something that involves their own interests, Yongsheng Group needs to go through several days of quarrels and discussions before they can make a final compromise. Then, the Supernatural Research Institute, which is more complicated and sinister, may need more time to discuss the final result, which makes him completely relieved. No more. Shaking the bottle in his hand, he signaled Zhuang Jian, who had finished drinking, to get up and walk to Bingshuang. After opening it, he took 4 bottles of high-proof white wine and 4 bottles of red wine, intending to use the power of the mixed wine to complete the plan of committing suicide. Zhang Fengjai, who was completely relieved, also wanted to relax so as to relieve his nervous mood. So, facing the white wine handed by Zhuang Jian, he took it without hesitation, drank it happily, and chatted with Zhuang Jian about the factions in the Research Institute, as well as the strength and number of top strongmen. 3 bottles of white wine and 2 bottles of red wine had basically reached Zhuang Jian's drinking limit, but seeing that Zhang Fengjai had not completely collapsed, she was unwilling to give up and had not yet achieved her goal, so she got up and took 4 more bottles of red wine and 4 more bottles of beer from the refrigerator. In the end, Zhuang Jian didn't know how much she had drunk until she was unable to support her heavy eyelids, and then she fell on the sofa and fell asleep. Looking at the white wine, red wine, and beer bottles all over the floor, and looking up at Zhuang Jian who was sleeping soundly, Zhang Fengjai, who was only slightly drunk, had a hint of tenderness in his eyes. Then, he stood up and carried Zhuang Jian to the guest room, then went back to the first floor to clean up, and then returned to the guest room where Xiao Yuxuan was. Xiao Yuxuan's mental state was very bad after fainting twice due to sadness and the sad memories just now. Zhang Fengjai, who felt a little bit of pity in his heart, couldn't help but comfort her softly. Yuxuan, the body is the capital of the revolution. Tomorrow, you will be cremated and buried. You should rest early. Looking up at Zhang Fengjai with red eyes, Xiao Yuxuan asked hoarsely. Yuzi, hug me. Unable to bear to disappoint Xiao Yuxuan, he hugged her directly in his arms, but only 10 seconds later, he heard the other party's steady breathing. In response, Zhang Fengjai bent over and picked her up and put her on another bed, but found that Xiao Yuxuan was holding onto her clothes tightly and couldn't leave, so he had to lie next to her. Being 50% drunk, and having been assassinated and chased one after another, he felt tired and closed his eyes, and then quickly fell asleep. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 280. The sun rises in the east, and everything wakes up. Even though Zhang Fenjai's consciousness was completely relaxed due to the influence of drunkenness and fatigue, his biological clock, which had long been a habit, still made him wake up on time at 6 o'clock in the morning. However, what was different from the past was that he suddenly felt soft and comfortable in his hands, which made him pinch it hard a few times. But the sound of whimpering that followed made him open his eyes immediately with a change of face. Then, he saw Xiao Yuxuan, whose face was as red as an apple, looking at him with tenderness in her eyes. Immediately retracting his right hand that had offended the other party's private parts, Zhang Fenjai quickly got up and apologized. Yuxuan, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it just now. Yezi, no need to apologize, I was willing. Looking directly at Zhang Fenjai's guilty eyes, Xiao Yuxuan did not hide the tenderness in her eyes at all, and boldly expressed her love. Yuxuan, I already have a girlfriend. Xiao Yuxuan's bold declaration of love touched Zhang Fenjai, but he couldn't bear to lie to her and told her the truth. Xiao Yuxuan's expression did not change at all because of Zhang Fenjai's truth. Her eyes were still full of tenderness. Yezi, I not only know that you have a girlfriend, but also know that your girlfriend is Solitsi, the Deputy General Manager of Yongsheng Group. But please rest assured that I will not be jealous of Sister Litsi. Because I just want to be the woman behind you, a woman who loves you silently, a woman who is willing to accompany you for life even if there is no name. Yuxuan, you are a peerless beauty with a stunning face, a good girl with a gentle temperament and loyal feelings. In the future, you will definitely meet a Prince Charming who will make you fall in love and accompany you for life. Xiao Yuxuan's selfless heart is probably the dream of all men in the world, and Zhang Fenjai, who has 7 emotions and 6 desires, is no exception. But moral constraints, psychological guilt, and responsibility for Solitsi still made him shake his head and reject Xiao Yuxuan's tempting proposal, and patiently persuaded. So, you should quickly put an end to those messy thoughts. Then, he did not give Xiao Yuxuan the opportunity to continue to express his feelings, and turned around and left the room with a little panic. Looking at Zhang Fenjai, who left the room in a panic, Xiao Yuxuan, who did not listen to his persuasion at all, showed an extremely happy smile on her face. But when she saw her sister lying on the other bed, her happy smile was instantly replaced by sadness, and then she got up and walked to Xiao Yuxi's body. After leaving the room with a little panic, Zhang Fenjai left the living room directly and came to the yard, and then after practicing a set of boxing taught by his second grandfather, he completely eliminated the distracting thoughts in his mind, and the thoughts disturbed by Xiao Yuxuan also completely returned to calm. But at this moment, Zhuang Jian's voice suddenly came from behind. Zhang Fenjai, good morning. However, Zhang Fenjai could clearly feel a hint of nervousness in her voice when she greeted him. He immediately remembered her nonsense and her sincere farewell after getting drunk this morning. His thoughts that had just calmed down were immediately disturbed again. After taking a deep breath and forcibly suppressing his complicated thoughts, he turned around and greeted her with a smile. Mr. Zhuang, good morning. Looking at Zhang Fenjai, who turned around, Zhuang Jian's eyes flashed with a trace of panic, and she asked with a little guilty and embarrassed. Zhang Fenjai, did I act crazy after drinking too much last night? No. While immediately shaking his head to deny, Zhang Fenjai walked towards the villa to explain. I just fell asleep on the sofa after drinking too much. No matter how I called you, you couldn't wake up. I could only carry you upstairs in an offensive way. I hope you don't misunderstand, Mr. Zhuang. It's okay. Zhuang Jian was secretly relieved that she didn't do anything embarrassing because of drinking too much, and she quickly waved her hand to signal. Then, she quickened her pace and passed Zhang Fenjai. After entering the villa, she went straight to the kitchen on the first floor, preparing to make him a delicate breakfast to show her gentleness and housekeeping. In response, Zhang Fenjai just shook his head and sat on the sofa with a wry smile, and began to think about how to dispel the incredible ideas of Xiao Yuxuan and Zhuang Jian. It is not difficult to dispel and change Xiao Yuxuan's ideas. You just need to take her to see more handsome and successful boys, so that her vision and spirit will be improved, and she will naturally give up on herself. Only for Zhuang Jian, who has been tempered by the world, he can't think of changing her mind for the time being. After all, the other party's identity and knowledge determine that most of the high-quality men in the secular world can no longer impress her. But he didn't know any of the outstanding monks in the Taoist sect, so he couldn't continue to improve her vision and knowledge. Just when Zhang Fengjai was having a headache about how to deal with Zhuang Jian's feelings, the mobile phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. He took out his cell phone and checked it. When he found that it was Solizi's number, he quickly answered it. "Yezi, where are you?" "I'm in Zhu Zhenjun's villa No. 7. "Don't run around, wait for me, I can arrive in 30 minutes at most." Seeing Solizi hang up the phone in a hurry, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a puzzled look, not understanding why she was so anxious. Fortunately, they could meet in half an hour at most, so he put away his cell phone without thinking too much, and then went upstairs to discuss her sister's cremation and burial with Xiao Yuxuan. The cremation of Xiao Yuxi is relatively simple, whether it is sent directly to the cremation plant or using the flame of a talisman. Only her burial is more troublesome. First of all, Xiao Yuxi's death was relatively sudden, so Xiao Yuxuan did not prepare a cemetery for burial in advance. Secondly, the cemetery where Xiao Yuxuan wanted her sister to be buried with her parents was auctioned off by the Kowloon Group at a high price some time ago and is planned to be developed into a high-end residential area. It is strictly forbidden to bury any deceased family members. In this regard, Zhang Fengjai gave two plans after careful consideration. The first plan was to wait until he returned from the Mid-Autumn Festival to personally visit more than a dozen woodlands around Ningji City and select a feng shui treasure land suitable for burial for Xiao Yuxi and her parents. The second option is to spend a lot of money to buy a luxurious cemetery with the best location in the cemetery forest, suitable for burying 3 people at the same time. Facing the plan given by Zhang Fengjai, Xiao Yuxuan could only give her her most precious first kiss when Zhang Fengjai wasn't paying attention, besides nodding her head moodily. This also made Zhang Fengjai even more panicked and fled the room to avoid doing ridiculous things impulsively.